Hi, Robert Perala here with the Perala Report, also on behalf of Coast to Coast AM. Thanks for tuning in. A lot of people have asked me what happened with my story regarding extraterrestrials. You might have read my book, The Divine Blueprint Roadmap for the New Millennium, also my second book, The Divine Architect, The Art of Living and Beyond. But on behalf of Coast to Coast, I want to tell you the story regarding extraterrestrials because maybe something like this has happened to you. On December 26th, 1977, I was a young man of 21 years old. I was on a skiing vacation right there in the area of Lake Tahoe, California, in the area of where California meets the Nevada border. To the side of this is Heavenly Valley, which is a ski resort. And I was on a skiing vacation. At the time, I didn't really know an awful lot about spirituality. I was studying Maharishi and learning about meditation, and I was studying a little bit about personal growth and spirituality, but I didn't know really an awful lot about extraterrestrials. And that night I went to bed. I was downstairs, and about 2:30 in the morning I was startled awake by an incredible storm that just seemed to illumine the entire room. Flashes of blue, violet, indigo, yellow, and green, and just light as bright as the sun, and a deafening sound that was happening like a freight train was going through the living room. And suddenly the ceiling opened up, and what looked like three astronauts somehow beamed down in front of me. And they wore silver suits. The suits themselves seemed to be alive. And then the side of the house opened up and dropped away, and there was a lighted tunnel of some kind. At the point that I started to scream, because I had no idea what was happening, I jumped up, I leaned forward and screamed, and just as soon as I started to scream, I was frozen in like this blue cocoon, and I couldn't move, and it was as though it was almost like the screaming now was pulled back from my consciousness. It's almost like I could hear my own self screaming. It sounded like it was in the back of my head, or the back, almost in the back of the room. And this tunnel was there, and these three 8.5 foot tall astronauts, which looked very much like this photograph taken by Jeff Grinshaw in Falkville, Alabama in 1973. Somehow he had a photograph. You only see about 10% of what was really there. You're missing the incredible flashes of lightning, the suit itself being alive. There was a visor. I saw no faces. And there was an orange antenna here. That looked very close to what this was. I don't know how he actually took this picture, but it was very close to what happened to me. And I've carried this photo now for 35, 37 years. And suddenly in this blue light, I was sent through this tunnel, and it was horribly painful. And I was just screaming inside this blue cocoon and going at an unheard of speed. And then suddenly I was brought into this sphere-like room that was illumined all around me and underneath me. There was no one waiting for me. There were no humanoids of any kind. There were no little gray guys or anybody there, as a matter of fact. And suddenly I was floating naked in this blue bubble, face up like this, and I was facing in front of like an obelisk, like a glass object of some kind. I don't know really what it was. It seemed to interface with me in some way. I don't know what it was doing. It was somehow taking a part of me, or interfacing with me in some way. And then suddenly it let go of me. And then suddenly I hurled back through this incredible tunnel of light at an incredible speed. And then all of a sudden I was floating horizontally above my bed in the room, and these cosmonauts, whatever they were, these astronauts were there in this arcing storm with this unbelievable sound, lowered me slowly down onto the bed, and then as I lied down and they set me down on the bed, suddenly the storm and the astronauts went back up, the ceiling closed up, and the side of the house closed up, and it was over, and it let go of me. I was in a state of shock for the first at least 2 hours. I threw up over the side of the bed. I had no idea what happened. I didn't know anything about extraterrestrials, so that would take a long time. And so to figure out. And so, and eventually I crawled over the bed, I crawled across the floor, pulled myself up onto the vanity, the little sink in the bathroom, turned on the light, and I was sunburned from head to toe with a sunburn all over me, and I was soaked in like an oil material, like a honey-like gooey kind of material, and I had no idea what happened. I was returned the following day to Los Gatos, California, where I had a small apartment, and I locked myself in my apartment for 3 months, and I didn't want to see anything like that ever again. I wasn't, for the first 3 months, convinced at all that this might have something to do with extraterrestrials. I just started to get the idea that this was some kind of close encounter with something very unusual. And as that happened, I started to venture to find out, could I talk to somebody about this? Today I teach this and I share this, and of course the radio and the books and the people and the conferences and coast to coast listeners and everything. We all have this dialogue going on day by day. It still exists for me today, but at that time there was nothing. I went to a metaphysical bookstore and I started to read about a woman named Clarissa Bernhardt, who eventually met with me and told me, you've had a close encounter with something very unusual, and described what this was about. I thought it was quite a remarkable meeting. And that led me also to the first UFO conference in California. There just wasn't UFO conventions then like there are today. And I met with Dr. J. Allen Hynek. He's the founder of Project Blue Book in the old days. And I met with him, and he wanted to hear my story, and he recorded it on a little cassette. You remember the little cassettes that we used to have? You put the cassette in and close the little plastic door. Tell me what happened. And I told him what happened. And there was a gentleman next to me saying, well, what happened? You know, tell me more, tell us more. And I looked over, and it was William Shatner somehow. And I didn't know he was into this kind of thing. I knew he was the TV actor, right? The Star Trek film and television series. I really didn't know much about him. He was very interested in the subject. They were very kind to me. I told my story. And I didn't really go public until July of 1993, when I went public for the first time. And it was a huge success. And then somebody asked me to speak at Stanford University. I went and spoke there. And since then, I have been speaking, you know, at conferences and lectures and studying a lot of things. I'm very much into behavioral science now. I welcome people who want to give us questions and send questions. I applaud people that tune into things like Coast to Coast AM and the Perala Report and many other shows like that. And so I just want to take this time to share my story so you would know exactly what happened to me. And I look forward to seeing you at, in the future. And you can find me at robertperala.com, and certainly tune into coasttocoastam.com. Thank you, George Norrie, and thank you, public, for listening to my story here. And now we know a little bit more about extraterrestrial science. So we'll see you real soon. Thanks for tuning into the Perala Report. Thank you so much.